if you've got 20 franchisees and they're only allowed to call 3 of them, that might be a red flag.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn. All right, today I have Sherri Seiber, the president, founder, the most important person at FranFund. We won't tell anybody else there that, but it may or may not be true. But Sherri, you and I talk at a lot of different events, and we have a very special topic to talk about today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Erik. I'm happy to be here. And you're right, we won't tell anybody else that who's in charge around here.
Yeah, we all know it to be true. No, you and I were chatting like we always do at these events. I love, like, there's a handful of people when I go to bigger industry events that I want to get some private time with, and you're one of those. And because you have a pulse on things that very few people have, and I love to learn from people like you to just get an update, to understand the things that are actually happening behind the scenes in franchising. And so I know at FranFund, you guys help a ton of franchise buyers become franchisees, and you are some of the best in class at that. My friend Shirley is amazing over there, and I just have so many great things to say. But today we're going to talk about something that you want to talk about. And that is, like, if you don't have your first 10 or 20 franchisees be wildly successful, like what, Sherri, if they're not successful?
All right. I mean, I am very passionate about this topic, and I started becoming passionate with the proliferation of all of these emerging brands that we're experiencing in the industry right now. There's some really great brands coming on board in the market segments that we need them to come on board in. But somehow the financial education of those franchisors and what they should be looking at in their franchisees is sometimes getting lost. And it's painful to us in trying to get some of these people funded, but it's also painful watching these brands grow. Because again, your first 10 to 20 franchisees are going to tell your brand story for a very long time. They're going to be your validators, or they're going to be your detractors.
So let's back up even further. Today, like, we are going to help emerging franchise brands, or like brands getting to that point where they are emerging, to have the right frame of mind, the right mindset, the right expectations going into it. And I'll say this, something that we at Front Street, we're always looking at, being an advisor or an FSO to emerging brands. We talk to hundreds a year. And most of the time it goes something like this. We don't have any franchisees yet. Our corporate stores are making a little bit of money, not making money, or they're making money, but it's an anomaly where we are. And, but we were told we have the most amazing concept, and we should absolutely be a franchisor, and we should, do that. And in 5 years, we'll be able to sell for $100 million. And I'm like, who told you that? And then they start naming some of the people that will remain nameless. But there are people out there that are so willing to tell people that have a unique concept that they should be a franchisor when they should absolutely not be a franchisor. Any comments on that? Because I think that's where some of these emerging franchisors get into trouble, early on. So let's start there and then kind of walk through.
Okay.
What?
Wow.
I know you have comments on that, so just comment away.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack there. The first thing I want to say is, and again, they shall remain nameless, but there is now a industry in creating franchises out of something that was, not to reuse the old chuck in a truck, but they were chucking a truck yesterday, and today they paid somebody some somewhat obscene amount of money, and now, boom, they have an FDD and they are a franchise. And there, the number of folks that we get calls from for funding for their candidates, now reminding you that they don't have any candidates, they're just trying to prepare for candidates and how will we handle them and what are we looking for and all of that kind of thing. And what kind of candidates they want to send us when they do have candidates is what got me started thinking about this topic. So what happens is if you're the founder of a franchise system, first of all, tremendous achievement, right? You're the founder of a franchise system now. So what we're seeing is if somebody even gives you a half smile in your direction and says they are interested in being one of your franchisees, I mean, now the founder is over the moon and they absolutely want to make that happen. And about fifth or sixth on the list of things they start to worry about is money. How's this person going to get funded? And when they send them to us and we do an evaluation and we find that, okay, well, I mean, if they're not qualified at all, okay, they're not qualified at all. We have not yet found out how to make money fall out of the sky for people that are not qualified. Although if we did, that would be make us really famous. But let's say they're just on the edge of being qualified.
So this
Let's
is
say
a
they can
candidate.
pay.
So this is a franchisor who has a candidate or a buyer, somebody that's saying, hey, I'm interested in your franchise. Might be their first one. It might be their 100th one, but you know, if they're not experienced or good, because I know one that I was talking to the other day, they have about 100 franchisees. And this founder was telling me, like, I'm letting people become franchisees because I need the capital from the franchise fee to keep going. That's not good, but I heard it from a founder the other day. So that's what we're talking about. Founders that are not capitalized and or they are just not experienced. They don't understand franchising enough to know that they need very well qualified franchisees to be their franchisees. And you're building your entire system off of qualified franchisees that you help support to become rockstar franchisees. So going back to that, like you're talking about somebody that is underfunded, that is interested in buying somebody's franchise.
And that is around what you just said about the founder needing to sell franchises to fund the training and all the things they need to do to run the franchise is the root cause of sending people to us that should not be a franchisee of that system. There are, if you're talking about an underqualified candidate, right? There are some systems that have been in business for years and years, and possibly they are equipped to champion someone that is underqualified. They can pay through the first part, blah blah blah. They might be able to make that work. But if it's a brand new franchise system, you are asking for trouble
Mm-hmm.
because let's just think. Let me give you a visual here. I like to look at visuals. So if your FDD, if your total project cost in your item 7, and that's one of the things I want to talk about. What do lenders care about in your FDD? But your item 7 should give you, this is the total amount of money you need to get this business up and running. Okay, so you have to plan for not just that amount of money if you are a smart person, or if you're getting an SBA loan, you've got to have that amount of money. Then you've got to calculate what does the FDD says the time to break even is, okay? And then you've got to add some, I would suggest some type of mitigation for in case the time to break even does not come to fruition as forecast. So you've got some money, you don't run out of money. So what happens is, I like to make this visual because people go, oh, boom, I get it. So simple Excel spreadsheet. Here's my expected revenue, income, blah, blah, blah. Here's my expected cost, blah, blah, blah. You do the math on that. And at first you end up with ugliest, bloodiest red number you have ever seen in your life. Okay. Then you go across month by month, and okay, now your revenue is starting to increase. The number stays red for some period of time, and then it might start to get lighter red, and then it might get gray, and then it might actually get black. When it gets black, you are still just have one-to-one coverage. You are still just breaking even. You are not yet making money. It's not until you get green that you start making money, right? So if you have some hiccups along the way, let's say, because I hear this fairly often, month 7, corporate decides they're going to do this national marketing campaign and you need to pitch in an extra few $1,000s. And you are running on a shoestring and you can't put together that extra few $1,000s and you miss that marketing campaign that now puts you at a disadvantage in the brand that you have. So that's whoops number 1. Whoops number 2, whoops number 2 could be the opposite, in that all of a sudden you have more clients or customers than you were expecting, and you can't hire people because you don't
Yep.
have the money to go out and proactively pay them. So, I mean, there's a myriad of reasons that you could get in trouble if you are not well capitalized in your first several months or whatever the time to break even is. So that starts the trouble.
Let's talk about item 7.
Yes.
That in the, so this is so relevant for everybody, for franchisees, franchisors, and franchise buyers. Item 7 is historical. You are using historical numbers and trying to do your best to give an idea of what things are going to cost a franchisee, from a low end to a high end. Doesn't take into things like tariffs, building, 2x4s that are, extraordinarily expensive, or labor costs going up, or real estate. It's like a point in time where that goes in there. And Sherri, I provide color, help me out with this if I'm not explaining it the right way. And then that's used in the FDD, and that's used 8 months later, 9 months later, for franchisees as they get that FDD, and that was done 9 months ago using numbers from 9+ months ago, and so it may not be accurate. And I know some franchisors are on the lighter side of the item 7, and some franchisors try to be on the heavier side, meaning they're trying to put more expenses in, and hopefully sometimes they do that maybe so the franchisees can get more money from lenders, and in case things are more expensive. So I kind of gave you a bunch of stuff there. Can you kind of package that up into a nice, neat way of saying it?
Yep. First of all, public service announcement to all franchisors. Pay attention to item 7, because if it becomes wrong a lot and lenders find out about it, you will get a black eye. And lenders talk just like we do about brands that are good to fund and brands that are not good to fund. And if you have an item 7 that is historically low, you're not accounting for the fact that rent in New York might be $100 a foot versus rent in South Dakota, whatever that might be.
$1 a square foot.
Yeah. If you're not accounting for that, you're going to get yourself in trouble, because what do the typical potential franchisee, what do? If they haven't done their validation correctly, validation meaning calling other existing franchisees, if there are any, to say, what did it really cost you? Then they're going to go with the lower side. That's human nature. So what's going to happen there is then, okay, let's say then you're still planning on your loan amount, your post-loan closing liquidity being X amount of money. And if right away your total project costs are higher than you thought they were going to be, you're cutting into your post-loan closing liquidity, which is going to keep you up and running while you're getting to that break even or starting to make money point of view. So it's a double whammy to the franchisor that gets it wrong, to the candidate that doesn't analyze it correctly, and that tries to execute on the low side. It's a recipe for disaster.
Do you see certain franchise brands that are having like more robust item sevens, meaning they are trying to like add in more marketing expenses and not afraid of that being too high? Because the reason that some franchisors don't want that, they don't want it to be too high for people to be like, oh, that's too much money for me. Like we don't really buy into that. Like we want it to be really accurate. But are you seeing other franchisors that are wanting a more accurate item seven, or are they wanting to keep that as low as possible?
So if you think about it for a second and you're saying, "Ooh, I want to keep my total project cost as low as I can so I can get more franchisees who are going to fail faster,"
Mm-hmm.
that is not a good idea. I mean, what we're able to do as a funding company, I mean, we're not a lender, but we facilitate loan packages, and we have a portfolio of lenders across the country who uh, trust us, and they want to see the loan packages that come from FranFund. And we know that if you've got somebody underfunded, they're going to fail faster.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, even if you even if you start performing um, with the revenue that the FDD reports, if you have not enough capital, working capital to keep you going, you could be doing well and still shut down. I know we've all seen restaurants that seemed like they had a line around the block and they were being so successful. And one day you look over there and boom, it's gone. What happened? They ran out of cash.
Yep.
They ran out of cash. They completely depleted all access to funds and they're done. And they couldn't cut themselves out of the hole. And that happens with restaurants. It happens with service-based businesses. It happens with all of the things that we see. And to answer the question you asked to begin with, are brands raising their total project cost? Yes, we are having success talking them into doing that because again, FranFund is we're on the side of the franchisor as much as we are on the candidate because we want to get those loans funded and we want those folks to be successful. We are able to communicate to the lender things that we can't talk about with the candidate because of
Mm-hmm.
disclosure rules that we can't share. But we can talk to the franchisor, and if there's a story we need to tell to the lenders, like say for example, their total project cost jumped up in the middle of the year, and they don't want to redisclose everybody they've got in the pipeline, uh, then we might have conversations with lenders about, hey, here's what they found out. This is what's going to happen in the future. This is where they are now. This is why you're seeing a disparity between what item 7 says and what's happening in reality. So we really have a lot of value to a candidate going through this process and to a franchisor that works with us because we see the front line, we see what happens, and we see what it takes to make people successful.
All right, I want to transition. I have one more question, but before we transition into like what do lenders really look for in the FDD, because I want to get in their mind in the FDD, and I know item 7 is a large piece of that. But with that item 7, let's say there's a franchisor that's very accurate with the build out costs, the marketing, everything's very accurate. 6 months later, 9 months later, are you seeing how it was once accurate, not accurate anymore due to the economy or things like that? Is that normal? Is that like just talk to somebody out there that is looking at buying a franchise and they're like, I still want to make sure that this is accurate. What would you say to that person?
Well, I would say that market conditions sometimes do, in fact, impact.
Mm-hmm.
You could have, like right now, we're in a landlord market, right? They have the upper hand right now
Yep.
because there was so much building that did not happen as a result of COVID, and so they're having a hard time catching up. So they're waiting for the best offer. So they'll cut you out for $2 a square foot because um, somebody got there after you looked at it, and they're going to willing to pay them a higher. So they're in the driver's seat. So you do have the real estate factor. you might have certain supplies that you need for that brand that have some kind of unexpected price increase that you have to accommodate. But again, if we know why, we can mitigate.
Yeah.
If it's a surprise and it happens over and over again without any intervention for us to explain what the story is, as a matter of fact, we can sort of trip into the next part of the FDD that the lender cares about with this topic, because the next one they really, really care about is item 20.
Ooh, let's talk about item 20. There's nothing more fun to talk about than item 20. Dive into item 20. What is item 20? Why do they care?
Item 20 shows how many units you started with last year, how many units you added or lost during the year.
Not good to lose units.
It's not good to use units without an explanation. And if you lose those units and it is because someone defaulted on an SBA loan, there goes your reputation again. So again, when we're talking about what these franchisors need to care about, they need to take their eye, they got their eye on the ball of new franchisees, but they need to widen that eye to the peripheral effect of what is happening with these franchisees. So if in item 20, lots of times at IFA, they'll have these sessions and they'll have somebody that comes up and they explain this disaster story that happened, and they ask the group to figure out what went wrong and what would you do to fix it. And then the founder or the company comes up and talks about what they actually did. And some of these systems had lost, 100 units overnight or during the year or whatever. We can go to lenders, and hopefully nobody has that on the reg, right? We don't need to be saying we can fix all of that. But let's just say there was something that a franchise system found out that, hey, we had a major change. We didn't anticipate the impact that would have on our franchisees' ability to make money or ability to run their unit, or whatever the market was demanding they weren't providing. Then they may have lost units, but then they may have done something miraculous, made some dramatic changes, and now that's all working again. Again, FranFund can go to the lender and explain that if we know. It's not something we can talk to the candidate about. That's for the candidate to find out when they're going through their validation, right? But for us to share with the lender, the lender starts seeing that. They're also going to go and look at the Coleman Report, which the Coleman Report is basically 10 years of history of that brand, if there is 10 years. It shows the number of loans, the amount of loans they got for the past 3 years. It shows the payoff rate of the loans for the past 10 years. It shows the 10-year cumulative default rate, and the 10 years annualized default rate of loans. So let me unpack that for a minute and just say.
Wait, before you unpack it, how often do you talk about the Coleman Report on podcasts?
I haven't in quite some time, but this
I was
has
going to
been
say,
something that,
this is not a common topic. Like, I'd be willing to bet most of the people listening have never heard of that. And it's pretty juicy. Keep going.
Okay, well, so to expand on the juiciness, the Coleman Report is a subscription. So don't anybody send me an email asking me for a copy. It's a subscription. You have to pay for. We're threatened within an inch of our life if we share it without somebody paying for it, because obviously this is a revenue stream for Coleman, right? But this is information that banks rely on.
Mm-hmm.
If they haven't funded a certain brand before, they're going to go and see the Coleman performance, because it's SBA loan default rates. And if you've got a new system, circling back to what the original topic is here, your first 10 to 20 franchisees, is if you've been in operation for 3 years and already your default rate's climbing, ooh-wee, I'm going to have a really hard time finding funding for you. If you're a franchise system that has been in business for 30 years, there are some of those legacy brands out there that turn over their franchisees, or they cleave different territories out, or they, whatever happens. Okay, they might accept a slightly higher default rate from a 30-year-old system, slightly higher, but they want to see under 5%. They'd really like to see more like 3%, right? Um, if they have a anything more than like 5, 6%, we need to have a very deeper dive explanation to be able to share with the lender as to why, what's going to prevent that from continuing. And by the way, if you, as a borrower, default on an SBA loan, that never goes away on your credit. That is a government loan, and the government has a very long memory. So people should bear that in mind. So should franchisors. If you're settling for a less than qualified candidate, or one that's just on the edge, they can pay the franchise fee, they look like they have enough money for the startup, they haven't even gotten a loan or whatever. And then you see these people falling out of your system. You're reporting it in item 20, and then you're raising the concern of SBA lenders nationwide.
You don't want to be on the bad side of the SBA. Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are two really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisor and you're frustrated that you're not awarding as many franchises as you thought you would, this is the reason I created the Franchisor Mastermind. If you want access to the information, the techniques that the best franchise sales organizations are using to award franchises, and you want what mature brands have with their playbook of having happy, successful franchisees that grow the right way, then you might want to check out the Franchisor Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections. They want the playbook to achieve both short-term and long-term success. They want to increase enterprise value in their brand. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. Anything else that you want to talk about, kind of like watch out for, or should we shift into like just in general, like kind of the lending landscape, because you have a view of that few people have. Where do you want to go?
We can talk about the lending landscape, and we're in a great time right now with SBA lending. As we all know, there's been an administration change in Washington, D.C. The new leader of the SBA is a powerful female. She knows what she's doing. She is the impetus behind the changes to the SBA policies that were announced yesterday, but they won't be effective until June 1st. But there's a couple of really important changes that are coming there. And one of them we're kind of excited about is the recreation of the franchise directory. Not to be confused with the franchise registry, that's a whole other thing. The SBA Franchise Directory. And so that merely indicates to lenders that that brand's FDD has been evaluated, or they've self-evaluated and claimed that it fulfills all the requirements of an SBA approved franchise brand for the SBA. And that will make it a lot easier for lenders across the country to decide to do lending for these emerging brands that are coming through.
So prior to June 1st, with the previous administration, trust me, this is not a political conversation we're having. this is a conversation about like uh, the things that are happening with different leadership in Washington and how that and what's happening with the lending landscape. So is it in layman's terms, there were not as many banks that were willing to look at loans for different franchise organizations because that directory was not available. It used to be available, then it wasn't available, and now it's becoming available again, which means there will be more banks like there was before that are willing to take a look at funding different franchisees as they buy franchise brands. So again, package that up in a better way to say it.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's all remember why the SBA exists. It's a government organization that was created to incentivize lenders to do what they consider riskier loans. And every lender in the country considers a first-time business owner risky. I don't care what their
Period.
background is. They're a risk. Boom. Okay. So again, with the proliferation of new brands, well, first of all, the SBA in January of 2021, they said to lenders, okay, we're abolishing the franchise directory and you will do what you do. Do what you do meant you, the lender, are responsible for any type of due diligence to make sure that that brand is SBA eligible and that you should be lending to it. Okay, so that put the onus on the lender to go and find that out. Well, that's daunting right away. Okay, so there were some lenders that just weren't willing to do loans for brands that weren't on the directory when they abolished it. Okay, so that cut out some folks. Or if they were willing to do them, they would mitigate their risk by saying, we'll do 3 of this brand, and then we'll see how they perform in the first 18 months, and then we'll consider doing more of them. So, this is not fun for me, right? This is not fun for FranFund. So now the guidelines will be back in place. It will be, they'll be, they say, and again, it just got announced. It's still in a red line state. The new SOPs are in a red line state, getting lender commentary and that kind of thing. They're supposed to be effective June 1st. So we'll know the actual requirements to get on the SBA directory by then. And hopefully it will provide the lenders a level of comfort for these new brands that are coming into the system. And many of them absolutely deserve to be on the SBA directory. So, there's a few other things in the new SOPs that'll be great, but lenders can still, they have to, the SBA outlines minimum guidelines for SBA, credit criteria, credit score, equity injection, loan size, all of those things. But lenders can have them be tighter. They can't be looser, but they can be tighter. And having this kind of comfort where the SBA now knows, hey, this is a brand that's been validated by this directory, that will be very helpful to all of us.
So let's just be clear on what the SBA is and what it isn't. They, like, a bank is still underwriting and lending the money. The SBA is like what's the best way to say it? Like a guarantor on that, or it's
Yeah.
backed by the SBA. So at the end of the day, is it fair enough to say some banks are like, this is the SBA says no on this when really they're saying no? Does that ever happen?
So let me explain.
Take the
So
first one first.
the SBA, again, successful government organization, which yay, right? Um, they do not lend money. Although when you hear them talk, a lot of times you think they do, but they are not the lender. What they do is they provide a percentage guarantee to the lender of the total loan amount. And then they also provide a recovery method for the lender to get their money back if they followed all of the SBA guidelines for that loan. They did their due diligence very well. They did all of their analysis, and that loan defaults. The SBA has to, I mean, the lender has to do everything in their power to recover as much of that loan amount as they can. And then they present a package to the SBA and says, this is how we underwrote the loan. This is the investigation we did. This is the outcome. We've been able to recoup 40% of the loan amount. Please help us with the rest. So that's how the SBA works. And again, it is one of the foundations of success for franchising. We need it. We want it. We want it to be successful. The SBA loan, there are, I have competitors that call it different names, but I don't care what you call it. It's an SBA 7A loan, right? It's a fabulous product.
Oh, that's funny. Little inside stuff there. Cause yeah, there's a lot of marketing techniques that people use, lenders use, or packagers use, or like a funding partner, like FranFund, like they could call it different names to make it sound really unique. But at the end of the day, you just need to know if it's the product that you want to use. And you guys are like pretty stinking open and honest. We're like, this is what it is. That's what I appreciate about you all over at FranFund. I've got friends over there that have been doing it for years that I knew before they were part of your organization. And one thing that I can always do is just trust that I'm getting very accurate, helpful information when I'm talking to you or Jeff or anybody on your team. And I think that's, just go off on a little tangent right now. That's, as an emerging franchisor, you need people that are your partners or vendors that are like FranFund or people like that you can fully trust, that you're getting the right information. That's why people come to us at Front Street, because they just want the shortcut. And we're like, oh, this is who you need to be using for all these different things, because they're tried, true, and trusted, and they're not going to steer you the wrong way. Because there's so many people, and I think it's just like any industry, but in franchising, there are so many people that will give you wrong or bad advice. So just double, triple check things out there as franchisees, franchisors, and franchise buyers. You need to have people like FranFund that are in your corner and that will tell you the hard things too. Like, you need to hear no sometimes. And that's why you need the good folks over at FranFund and different vendors. So anyway, that's my tangent. Hopefully we help some people out there. Sometimes, Sherri, it's good to talk people out of franchising, out of buying a franchise, out of becoming a franchisee, out of becoming a franchisor, because they're just not ready for it. You want to go back to some of that stuff? Like, what are some mistakes that early emerging franchisors make? Let's just riff on that a little bit, because I got a bunch of them.
Golly, I've got a bunch of them too. I don't know why this just pops into my head, because this really, well, it does have to do with funding, but enterprise builders, franchisees that think they're going to own 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 units, they usually go overboard on the build out of unit number 1. They want the marble instead of the tile. They want the deluxe refrigerator instead of the basic one, and all that. And if you interview, you could just call one out of the clear blue sky and say, what'd you do differently on your second unit? They'll say, well, I didn't upgrade things that were non-value added. And upgrading things that are non-value added adds to your initial total project cost. It makes you possibly run out of that working capital sooner than you need to, and not be able to accommodate the surprises that happen in those months between opening the door and time to break even. I know I sound like a broken record on that, but again, those people, those people, there's 10 to 20 people, they're your validators. So that's who you're going to be telling all your new candidates, hey, call Sally, John, Peter, and ask them how their brand's going. Well, if you've got 20 franchisees and they're only allowed to call 3 of them, that might be a red flag. It's usually those people are and I just be curious to know if you agree with me. The root cause of unhappiness with most of them is they're not making as much money as they thought they were going to make, right?
Yep.
And they're not making as much money, and it might be because they are not completely following the system. but it also might be they're scared of running out of money because they didn't capitalize themselves correctly to begin with. And
That's
so
so
now
true. And
they're
I
no
think
longer your
that's,
validator.
yeah. And that's true for franchise. What you just mentioned is true for franchisees and franchisors. I see some Front Street, we go in and we're like, you don't need this fancy marble. You don't need this imported from Italy. You don't need this imported from wherever. Like we can get the same look and feel, very similar for half the price. Let's do that. And it can be shipped out to everybody in the entire country. Let's do that. All of a sudden you save $100,000 or $200,000. That's great. We like
Boom.
that. Doesn't not everything has to be customized. So we like things like that. So we tend to do that. Founders are initially very proud of the nice stuff that they have. But version 2 of that flagship should be a model that can be duplicated across the country at a very good price without jeopardizing brand standards. And so I also see it as franchisees, though. Franchisees come in and there is the ability to open up, and I'm just using round numbers. You can open up and build something out for $100,000. But sometimes they want to go overboard on different things, whatever it is, maybe more marketing that they think is great marketing. So they 3x the marketing on something that's not beneficial, or they buy more expensive furniture when they really didn't need to and they were advised against it, or whatever, or they pay a manager a bunch more than they should, than what's advised. So even though the franchisor might be doing the right things, telling them to keep things under budget, but they go over budget, by 50,000. So now they're $150,000 in it because they've hired some vendors that they didn't need. They hired some employees that were overpaid, and they overpaid in build out. Now they're 50% over budget, and that impacts bottom line. And so if they're validating, they're going to blame the franchisor for that, not the franchise. They're not blaming themselves. And that's normal. I've been there. I've done that. But those are the kind of the things that um, people validating need to understand, like, why are some of these over budget? And it's important to understand, because if it is systemic of the franchisor, you need to know that. Are they the ones that under promised and now everything's coming in more expensive? And did they do that on purpose? Or was that part of just inflation, or project costs going up, or landlords not giving as much tenant improvement dollars, or whatever it is? Like, you need to understand if that's a franchisee issue or if that's a franchisor issue, or a little bit of both.
That's absolutely true. And that can tie back into, I mentioned earlier, the post loan closing liquidity. I can't emphasize enough how important it is. Before you close your loan, you're going to have your accurate, if it's brick and mortar, you're going to have your accurate lease rate. You're going to have your loan payment. You're going to have your own, unless you've got an outside source of income, you're going to have your own personal expenses to cover before you start making money. And so thinking about what that post loan closing liquidity needs to look like so you can sustain yourself until you do start breaking even is so important. We have to work with people. We're not a fiduciary. I need to say that very clearly, because so we can't do people's projections for them. Plus, the lender should be able to call up the borrower and say, hey, buddy, tell me about this loan you're getting. What are you going to use it for? Why do your projections look like they do? Why, all the things. You got to be able to talk to it. We don't need to be able to talk to it. But we have to coach people all the time because they go on the low side of projections. So if we were to let that go to the lender, it looks like a going out of business sale instead of I'm starting a new business and I'm very confident that it's going to grow quickly. And so we do a lot of coaching on that and getting people to realize, hey, uh, this is what you're committing to. This is what these costs look like. This is what you're going to have to be successful. And it's not bad. I mean, if it's an 18-month break even, I mean, you and I both know there's plenty of brands out there that break even that 18 months to 2 years, whatever. You got to be prepared for that and
Yeah.
realize that on day one, you're not going to make that month's revenue. And again, I always have to have the ripple effect of you're rippling out your brand reputation with lenders, your impact on validation, your impact on the Coleman Report. All of these things start to add up, and there's a story there to be told. Is it a good story or a bad story? It's kind of
Okay.
up to the franchisor to make sure it stays a good story.
Okay. In your mind, I'm sure you've already had bad franchisees go in your mind as you're talking, franchisors and good franchisors and bad franchisors. Without naming the brand, get a good one that has gone kind of full cycle, because franchisors can sell a bunch and get a bunch open, and then all of a sudden they might not do very well. So they might have a bunch of them sold and a bunch of them open all at the same time, and then you don't know how well they're going to do. They might crush it, they might get crushed. So when I say is have a brand in mind that's kind of gone full cycle, you've seen them do it the right way. What did they do right? What is the playbook that they followed that you think other franchisors should follow?
A lot of times with new brands, especially brick and mortar related, real estate becomes the crux. It becomes the root cause of all evil, because the brand did not anticipate the availability of real estate beyond the first, let's say, 10 or 20 units. And now all of a sudden, the brand makes sense. People love it. People are clamoring to buy it. You let them buy it because you want to grow like that. And all of a sudden you find out the type of real estate required for that brand to be successful is not as readily available as you want it to be. That is, that's heartburn times 50,000. So the brands on the flip side of that have done well have proactively, I mean, they've got a real estate department that's their 100% of their job is to keep that real estate coming. Keep it identified as quickly as you're selling franchises. Keep the real estate identified so that you don't have this 1 or 2 year lag time of trying to find real estate. We have people in our pipeline right now that have been waiting for more than a year or so to find the right real estate. That is not okay. Those
So
people
to
did
help
not
some
budget for
brands
that type of
out,
wait.
and we'll bring this to a close here in a second, but franchisors, one of the things that we do at Front Street when we go in and look at some of these brands, and they're like, we look at their flagship location, it's 2,000 square feet. And we're like, you don't need 2,000 square feet. Why is this not 1,200 square feet? And what's an easier spot to find? And so you need to be thinking about that as well. Do I need it as big as it currently is? Even though you want a big waiting room, a big room for this or extra that, like, does it need to be that big? And can franchisees break even 6 months faster and open up 6 months earlier their next one? And that happens at scale? How much better is that for the franchisor and the franchisee? And then like talk to the real estate experts to be like, what's going to be easier for me to find? The 2,000 square foot, the 2,500 square foot in Class A, or a 1,200 square foot, somewhere else. On the flip side too, what if you need it to be only 800? That might be an issue too, because the quantity of 800 square feet in real estate, the real estate market out there may not be readily available. So you need to be thinking through some of these things. And I think that's the point of this whole podcast. There's things that franchise mom and pop businesses, they get told they have an amazing product when people don't even know if they do or don't, but then they turn it into a franchise and then they're just thrown to the wolves. And the best thing that they can do is not actually sell a franchise, but learn from a lot of smart franchising people. With that said, I'm going to kick it over to you for the last comment. But if that's you and you are not sure if you should be franchising or be pouring gas on your franchise to sell a bunch, you need to go to some of these conferences like the Unconference, Springboard, some of these really good ones that are for emerging brands, where Sherri's walking around, I'm walking around, other people are walking around, giving our time to talk to people and around. And there's some just amazing people that I would consider mentors. I would consider people that I just go to as the foremost experts in their field in franchising. And I love going to those types of conferences. So if there's one conference that I would go to as an emerging brand, it's absolutely Springboard. Springboard, not Unconference. Unconference is so much fun. Springboard is really solid for most people.
Springboard's a really great one to go to. And then just to leave with final words here. Franchisors, when you send us a candidate that is not financially qualified and we tell you, no, this person is not financially qualified, accept that. That's a gift. That is not a negative. That is, we saved you from a brand or a candidate that's not going to make it. Yay, they think your brand is fantastic and you walk on water, and you still do. But us saying, no, they're not financially sound is a gift to you.
The thing that you don't do is go into the Franchise Secrets Facebook group and say, hey, I got someone denied for a loan from FranFund. Can anybody else help me get that person funded? And guaranteed you'll get somebody that will get that person funded. Not guaranteed, but there will be people that will fund it. But do you really want that? And it goes back to having trusted people in your corner that are going to help you make the right decisions versus just a decision to help you grow, regardless of what that looks like 5 years down the road. Sherri, you're awesome. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Erik. You're awesome also, and thanks for having me.
SiriusXM hasn't added support for that with Siri.
Hold on. You were just saying I was awesome, but Siri got mistaken for Sherri. So please go back to telling me how awesome I am again.
Erik, you're really awesome, and thank you so much for having me on today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I could have written that out for you. All right, I'll let you go. Thanks.
Thanks, Erik.
Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.